I landed at Larrabee Studios. So started assisting at Larrabee, and through
Mm.
that, I kind of built up. I built up a a clientele of people that would come through. Um, some of the early ones being like Death Row. They were constantly in need of someone who's able to record and get their stuff done. So and put up with the hours. I was a 21-year-old kid or whatever at the time, and working 140, 160 hours a week
Wow.
was like, yeah, whatever. Let's just do that. Just live in the studio. And so I got a big chance with them, and so that was you know, and especially for someone who came from Northern California, who you know most of my you know career from that point was doing live sound for rock bands uh, and bars, up in Chico,
Yeah.
so to switch to hip hop, it was a world I really knew nothing about. I think I had all of two hip hop records at the time. I think I had NWA's Straight Outta Compton, and then
Great
the,
album.
the Nasty As You Wanna Be album. I think that was
Yeah.
the other the True Life Crew. I think that was kind of the extent of my hip hop at the time. So to be thrown into a situation where I was having some of the best people in the world, from Cypress Hill to Dr. Dre to Will Smith and a bunch of other people like this, to kind of show me what real hip hop was and what it
Mm.
meant, and why what was good and what was bad, and what like I had a I was kind of like a sponge at 21, like most people are, I was
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so excited just to kind of
Yeah.
learn um, more about this music, and what this music was. So yeah, that's kind of the early part of my career.
That's crazy. So were you before that point, were you listening to bands like Run DMC just on the off chance from time to time, or were they not really on your
Yeah,
radar at that moment?
it wasn't that they weren't on my radar. Run DMC, of course, was probably even. I mean, that was my elementary school years almost. Those songs were huge, and I listened to them. And I was like every other kid, break dancing on cardboard back then when I was a kid.
Yeah,
We would have break dance parties and watch breaking, and so
so fun.
definitely, hip hop culture, even in a white suburb that I grew up in, was still very
Mm.
prevalent. Was it still very prevalent and very much like, oh, but yeah. So it's just yeah, it was kind of a realization when I came to LA, how much I didn't know, when
Yeah.
which always is fun when you're in your early 20s and you want to start really absorbing your craft and learning something. So
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we've talked about this previously, that you said you were listening, for example, to Pearl Jam's 10 as
mm,
well as a kid. And, you told me about you were working as a pizza
yeah,
delivery
yeah,
guy as
as a
well.
pizza, yeah. My schedule during that time, like my first couple of years in college, I would work at a bakery at 4 o'clock in the morning, make croissants and baguettes. We would pack up my Honda hatchback with all the baguettes and croissants and other
No
pastries I
way.
made that morning. Then on my way to school, I would drop them off at all the little cafes.
Mm.
All the right.
Yeah.
I would go to school till probably about 4 or 5, and then I would return to my little suburb area and work for a pizza company.
Hmm.
So I was in my car a lot, and so yeah, Pearl Jam 10 was my one of my because I couldn't stop listening to it at that point. It was one point. I had the benefit of working with a lot of great mentors through Larrabee Studios, and
Yeah.
watching a lot of people do a lot of great albums. An assistant back in those days, was basically in charge of documenting what was going on in the mix, making sure that the half-inch machine was aligned, and when we're
Yeah.
and I would record the mix from the multi-track to the half, dump it down to the half inch. I would do it all the particulars, but it was fun because I got to watch people like Nick Lene, who produced and engineered the album. I get to watch him work and see his process, and that was the benefit of working in a big studio like Larrabee's, where I got to see people like Nick Lene. We're
Yeah.
talking about Pearl Jam. I got to watch Tim Palmer,
Yeah.
one of my big Dave Way, who was just an amazing pop and R&B mixer. I got to watch him. I got to watch all these really just fantastic, Sylvia Massey. Yeah, and assisting. I mean, I was, Dave Pensado's assistant for, months and months, or year, maybe even years. I don't know. It was, so, whenever he was at Larrabee. So yeah, so I got to see all these different people's styles, and then that's the great thing is you just get to type, like I'm like, oh, I really liked what he did over there. So you take that little piece
Yeah.
of what that guy did, and a little piece of what that guy did. When I first saw, I think it was Dave Bianco, do the sidechain compression through, I think it was some distressors at the time,
Mm.
drums. It blew my mind, like how much bigger drums could sound. I was like, oh
Yeah.
wow, didn't realize drums could get like like this. And I was just learning those sort of tricks while you're in there watching these guys do these kind of iconic albums. I got to watch people like Tim Palmer mix Tears for Fears or Poe or
Whoa.
all
Okay.
these really cool albums,
Mm.
and I worked on Great Southern Trendkill album, um, and watching people like Ulrich Wild. I don't know if you know Ulrich, but
No. No.
he's a fantastic in Power Man 5000 and all these sort of things.
Oh, I know Powerman 5000. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was and he was huge and still a great friend, and being able to watch him work and seeing all of everybody's little creative little tricks. Well, yeah, I mean, I came in to Larrabee, as I said, and then Death Row was
Yeah.
one of their big clients,
Yeah.
and through Death Row, I met Dr. Dre, and then I started working for Aftermath after Death Row. So I kind of followed Dr. Dre, and of course, it was Dr. Dre that introduced me to Eminem, and introduced me to 50 Cent, The Game,
Yeah.
all sorts of people, Kanye West, and Talib Kweli. These were all people, that we were working with at the time. So um, Dre would always have two rooms going when I was working at Aftermath.
No way.
He'd be one room where he was, doing his thing, either creating
Yeah.
the beat or working on it, and then there'd be the other room where I would be with the artist, usually doing they would whatever beat they were doing in the other room, they would send back to me, and then I would do a lot of the vocals and stuff like that. So with like Game, like I would sit there and kind of really develop him as an artist to a certain degree. He
Yeah.
was art. Don't I'm not taking credit for his artistry at all, but
No.
um, he you know maybe at the time he thought doing four vocals on a lead was the thing to do. And I was telling him, no, 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 you only need one. And so I would sit there and, kind of like re-edit his vocals so I could get them to Dre. And so Dre could hear the song and kind of a way he's used to hearing it. And yeah, so it was a wonderful uh, learning experience
Mm.
to be kind of like thrown into the fire that way. We're like, oh yeah, you're in charge of this room and you got to here's the things that we need to get done. So Rakim is going to be in today, and you got to get all of his vocals and help him through this process. And, so it was definitely fun. Usually we rolled into the studio a little after noon, and then if we got out, at 2 o'clock in the morning, that would have been an early day. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of days that were, we finish around 6, and then the next thing I know, I'm ordering breakfast, and then we start all over again.
Yeah.
So Um, yeah, no, there was no real set thing, but it was kind of just understood that I just show up every day and it was work. So,
Yeah.
I did that for almost 10 years with Dre. Um,
Wow.
and then I, kind of like left with Dre, and then, and kind of freelancing, and then at that time 50 Cent was really happening, so I was just doing a ton of 50 Cent stuff. Um, and it yeah, it kind of snowballed from there, and then next thing I know, I'm just kind of picking up everybody's projects here and there.
And at that moment in time, I understand you were working with Destiny's Child as well. So you mentioned that you did some recording with Destiny's Child as well.
That was early. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was during the assisting phase. So I was assisting people like Kevin Davis, who was an amazing mixer.
Okay.
Uh, but Kevin often didn't want to do vocals or didn't, so I would do the vocals or something like that. So I would end up recording Destiny's Child, and but for the most part, all that stuff, early stuff was all mixed by Kevin Davis, or the stuff I was working on. And then I did a lot of stuff with the producer he was working with at that time that was doing that stuff was Tricky Stewart. Um,
Yeah.
and we would do different projects together, and I would end up being the guy they would call to come in and to do the recordings because I was convenient, and they knew that I would be moving on to the mixing process with someone like Katie at that time or whoever it
Yeah.
was, and then it was nice to have a carry through of someone who like kind of knew what was going on with the project. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, and then I also I kind of stepped into the world of studios um, on the end of analog and the beginning of digital, and since I had gone to college, I was very familiar already with what at that time was called what was it called something design, audio design. I can't remember whatever Pro Tools
Yeah.
used to be called.
Yeah.
Um, so I was kind of familiar already with Pro Tools, and so I was able to help people through that process. So I was kind of known as
Serious.
that guy that was able to bridge a lot of people from analog to digital.
That's amazing. So was that a big change for you? So I know that, as you said, you started off um, in the analog world and then started moving into the digital world. So how did you transition? How did you feel? Did you take to it straight away, or was it a bit of a change? Or and are you in a hybrid situation? Are you now? Is that how you work?
I mean, I've mixed in the box for over a decade now.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, at some point I was working, I think, with 50 or somebody, and I would do the mix twice. I would do it once on the SSL, and then I would do another mix also in the box, and then I would have uh, the mix put on externals for 50 to go back and forth between. And when he couldn't tell the difference between the two, like he didn't know which one was which, I was like, well, there's no point in using the board anymore. So
Yeah.
because he would want to be like, all right, let's pull up this song and do that. Oh, okay, all right, let's finish that one. Let's go back to this other song.
Mm,
And then the days of having to work on the SSL where we had to pull it up, it would be 45 minutes or so between each song. So as I set up the board and recalled it, and twist each knob back to where it was supposed to be.
yeah.
Where of course in the box, you're instantly back, uh,
Yeah.
and able to move in a faster pace that was more agreeable to the artists.
Do you find as well, so you found it's more agreeable to the artist. So did you find that your workflow sped up? So you found that you could work with more artists and more projects because you were in the box? Were you working with the same amount of artists or pretty much the same?
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay focused. So like if I'm doing a mixed project, I try not to get too many other things going on at the
Mm,
same time, even
yeah.
today. I will like take some mixed projects on and then do some also mastering projects, in between,
Yeah.
mixes or whatever. But for the most part, when I'm trying to do something, I try to knock it out in blocks. I'm like, all right, I'm going to spend my block of time on your mix
Mm,
project and get that done just because I kind of want to be a little singularly focused on that that project,
yeah.
getting it done. But yeah, I mean, definitely switching to digital added a flexibility in that range, and it especially mixing in where when I master, I do a hybrid. I do there is an outboard chain that I have, outboard gear chain that I have,
Okay, that's interesting.
and so which is easier because mastering is it's it's we're not using as many channels, of outboard gear, and so there's not as much to document, and not much to recall. So I'm able to add the colorization of the analog gear
Mm,
in the mastering chain, which I really
yeah.
enjoy, which I really have enjoyed. Getting back to stepping back out of the box and using some fun toys.
So do you find with the fun toys, I remember talking to a couple of other engineers about this a while ago. Do you find with the fun toys that it helps you play with color and add color and textures and saturation? Do you find that you can't really emulate that in the box yet, or do you think in the box there are tools out there that are good enough to do that, or how do you feel when
Yeah,
you're approaching color?
yeah. I mean, I think for the most part, the outboard gear that I have is mainly that I use is mainly color. Like I use the curve bender as my main EQ. So like if I do
Oh,
need to do
great.
any sort of like when mastering any sort of really razor type uh EQing, I'll usually
Mm,
do that in the box first before I send it out through the mastering gear or through
yeah.
the analog chain. That way I kind of solve all the little small problems with the kind of very transparent and uh you know as least phase shifting EQ as I can, and then I'll send it back out through the analog gear and add all the colors and all
Mm,
what I can, whether it's the curve bender or the clariphonics, or I have the better maker and a couple other boxes that we love to kind of like add that color with.
yeah. Fantastic. So do you sometimes find that you approach different masters with a different outboard gear? Do you sometimes think, oh, okay, well, I fancy this flavor today, so I'm going to go with this. How do you know which? How do you know? Do you already have the? I think I read somewhere that you don't tend to use references. So I know a lot of
Um,
coaches like myself. I use references all the time. It's how I learn. But did you start off with references, or did you just go, or did you learn your craft by your ears alone as you went along? And how do you
yeah,
even do that?
um, I, I I don't use references in the sense of where I listen to another song when I'm
Mm,
doing like when I'm mixing something. But what I will do as a reference, I will listen to what the artist has been listening to,
yeah.
like their rough mix,
Okay.
because I feel that the rough mix tells you a lot about what they like about it, and so like I
Yeah.
got it. I'm a person that's come in just to mix it, and they've been listening to this for 4 to 6 months or whatever it has been, and so it's gotten to me, and I've never heard the song before, but they're in love with the song and know the song inside out, and they know it. So I have to kind of like quickly understand what is it that they like about the rough that they have, and
Mm,
how can I enhance it
yeah.
and kind of bring all that out, and that I will listen to that sort of reference and get a reference point from there, but I never have another hip hop song in the session or something to go back and forth from, like usually the music will just tell me where it needs to go, and um, the production will say, yeah, or will dictate, what kind of colors it needs or doesn't need, or where it needs to be beefed up and doesn't need to be beefed up, and that comes from
Yeah.
also just really knowing your monitors that you're listening to, and that sort of thing.
So what talking about monitors, we've seen on the community from Trevor and maybe Mandy's your friends Trevor and Mandy maybe have talked about this before, but we've heard your studio is pretty souped up with the monitors. So what monitors are you using?
I mainly use, to be honest with you, my little Yamaha. I got they're the HS50s, which are kind of like the HS5s. They were like before the
Nice.
HS5s came out. And I use those with the Yamaha sub alternate,
Mm,
and I have a dangerous remote, you know, uh, the system.
nice.
So it all goes through the dangerous, the switch for speaker switching. I do have actually an external passive switchers, so I can have more options, because I have the right now I have the cubes, the Yamahas, the ATCs, and I have some mains that I built myself.
So cool.
Um, so like if I I guess if I could turn this around here.
Yeah, yeah. Go for it, man.
So you can see here, I
Wow.
got the cubes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then the Yamahas, then these are the ATCs. The little weird ones on top there.
Yeah.
I don't really use them too often.
That's
What are
so
those
cool.
called? I'm trying to remember the name of them right now. I don't know why it's escaping me, but yeah, the little concentric speakers that I don't really use that often. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so and then the up here are my custom made speakers that I
Stunning.
actually they're dual eights. Uh, they're triamped with that have dual 18 subs.
Dude, that's crazy.
So
Do 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 you
if I want to blow away the neighborhood, I really can.
yeah. Did you sometimes, like, get in the studio in the morning and just kinda press go and they go, "Oh, no, wait, we need to turn everything down," or did you already have the
No,
level?
we're
No,
pretty
no,
safe.
no.
We're pretty safe about it, I think. So
So talking about, I talked to a couple of friends about this over the past couple of weeks. A couple of people that you know as well about looking after your ears and as an engineer. So it'd be really interesting to find out. So I think a lot of people here would want to know how do you, especially as an amateur or an intermediate, how do you look after your ears? What tricks do you do? Is there any? I know that I've talked to one friend about different foods and well, what do you do? How do you do it?
mainly it's just taking breaks for me. Don't get too fatigued. So I'm fairly conscious about how long I go, and then I take a break. I like listening to the song in another room to hear the mistakes I'm making.
Mm.
Um, then keeping my ears clean is another one. Like
Yeah.
I have a fairly active wax buildup. Not to be too gross, but like like the old ears like to make some likes to make some serious wax. So I kind of make sure
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
I'm constantly putting some hydrogen peroxide in my ear and kind of letting it
Mhm.
soften up the wax. And I have the soft bulb squirter with warm water, and it gets rid of the wax buildup. Working on the Eminem Show, we got beat out for album of the year that year, but we did win best rap album. So
Yeah.
that was a pleasure to be a part of it, and I was nice nice to see people like Eminem be recognized, Dr. Dre be recognized, and people like my buddy Denon Porter, who was part of D12 and part of Eminem's crew, be recognized for his work, and just see everybody really get that recognition happen. It's always fun to see all your friends come up.
You've also worked on some Michael Jackson stuff as well?
Once again, I was working at Larrabee Studios. He was a client there, so I got to assist on albums, and then I got a couple stuff I was able to get in and record with. There was some sessions with him and Rodney Jerkins that
Oh, so
I
cool.
remember. They were fantastic sessions because it was in the writing phase for this
Mhm.
album that he was going to do with Rodney, and so it would just be Rodney on the piano, the grand piano, and Michael with a U47 mic, and we would
Mad.
just I would record it straight to DAT. It was going like from going from straight from the SSL right into the DAT player, and that was it. It was kind of these simple little writing sessions. So having
Mm.
those quiet little moments with Michael Jackson was really fun. I think one of the most interesting moments I had with Michael Jackson is just kind of realizing there's a few moments I didn't realize what a brilliant person he was. He was very very savvy in the world of finances and a few other things like
Yeah.
like buying up the catalogs of Beatles and stuff like this. He also when he was mixing, like he would memorize the board. So we were doing a mix with him, and he's like, "Oh, I got to fly to Paris, so just call me up with when you finalize the mix." And I'm like, "All right." So we had this like box that you could plug into the patch bay out of the tube bus, and it would go into the phone, like, and it would sound like kind of like hold music. So
Okay.
this was probably 1996, 97, somewhere in there, and
Mm.
uh, you know we're still on brick phones, like for mobiles. Whenever we call up, I'm in LA, and we call up Michael, who's in um, Paris, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, here's the song. Go, you ready to listen to it?" And he listens to it down, and then I get off the phone with, or I get on the phone with him, like, "So what'd you think?" He's like, "Sounds great, except for this one sound," and then he makes this, chicka paka chicka poo, chicka paka chicka poo, chicka paka chicka. I'm like,
Love it.
"Yeah." He's like, "If you could just bring if you could just bring that up like a, like a dB,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "All right," and I look at the board, and there's like 20 boom, chicka paka chicka boom, chicka paka chicka boom, chicka paka chicka sounds, right? So like I solo one. I'm like,
Amazing.
"Is this the one you mean?" And he's like, "No, no, no." And he's not seen the board, he's on the phone with me. He's like, "No,
Yeah.
no, no. It's three faders to the right." So I go, three faders to the right, and I solo another one, and I'm like, "This sound?" And he's like, "Yeah, that one. Bring it up like a dB." So I bring it up a dB, and I swear to God, the whole mix just went locked together even better. Like it just all of a sudden grooved more in. I'm like, "My God, how do you hear that?" He's on a phone, like a crappy, wireless phone
Yeah, yeah.
in the mid '90s. I'm calling around the world, from Los Angeles to Paris, and somehow he picked up over the phone over this one sound, and he memorized the board to tell me where it was so that he could actually raise it. And I was like, so I was a little blown away. I was like, I don't even know what to say.
Tell us about how you evolved doing your mixing and your mastering and recording during the last decade. So how have you progressed over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think, when I kind of like really started settling into my current studio, and I've owned the studio for more than 15 years, or I've been here for more than that. But
Mm.
I was still, in the early times, I was still going to SSL rooms and mixing and stuff. But now that I've kind of like switched gears, I've just found that I've kind of had moved into wearing more hats. Um, some of it's because of growth, and I want to, like
Mhm.
producing and
Yeah.
writing things. I want to move into that, and some of it was out of necessity. Some of it, like starting the mastering company up with my buddy Mauricio. We both came to the kind of the realization that we were taking stuff to mastering engineers, and not that we didn't like it. It was just that we're still overseeing the whole process, and kind of like, no, we don't want that done. We don't want that. Like, so we're already micromanaging the process as engineers. So we just kind of came to the point like, why don't we just master each other's stuff? And that kind of blossomed
Yeah.
into a company that, like, okay, now we're mastering other people's stuff too. Um,
So cool.
so yeah, it's that's how that kind of developed on that end. And yeah,
Mm.
and as as your career goes, like there's sometimes one artist will lead you to another, an artist will lead you to another artist, and then sometimes there'll be dry spells. And I guess like
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
like I would say the 2010s, it probably, it started being a little bit weird, but then all of a sudden trap music started happening, and
Mm.
I started getting calls from, these guys I used to work with that were A&Rs and stuff, and they're like, "Hey, we need to get this done." And so next thing I know, I'm doing albums like Blueface's albums, and things like this.
So cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'll do a lot of, I ended up mixing a lot of trap music. Um, and at the same time, as I said, I got it allowed me to do a lot of more my pet projects where I was, writing and mixing. I found a production partner who I really just he and I really heard things the same way. My buddy Alex Elna, and we formed a production company, and we created a TV show that we're trying to shop right now, and doing,
Oh,
doing
yeah. Okay.
all sorts of fun. So it's like it
Wow.
all just kind of
Nice.
develops and develops and like it's so you're starting to expand your own universe.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about the TV stuff, or is that very much under wraps at the minute,
Right now
or?
it's a little bit under the wraps, but it's
Okay.
it's based around my kind of like myself and Alex and our travels, and learning about cultures through music.
Oh, dude, that's so
So
cool.
yeah.
So, so cool. I know that we were talking about this earlier on, that you sent me through some really interesting music that you've worked on. So I know we've touched on very brief. So obviously we all know you for your work over the last couple of decades, but you produce and you write and you make your own music. So how often do you get to have that pleasure of writing your own music? How often does that happen?
Not as much as I would like to,
Mm,
as of late, because I'm just so busy mixing and mastering. But
yeah.
I'm like with this new kid I'm producing, I wrote a song with him, and we're gonna record that next week, and
Yeah.
uh, I'll be producing all of his vocals and getting all that stuff done for him
Yeah.
on other tracks too. So I have a little bit of a creative outlet through that type of scenario. But yeah, I don't write as much as I wish I did, but at the same time, I'm happy that I'm busy mixing and mastering people.
What music do you listen to for pleasure? What's in your record collection? What type of bands do you get home and you put it on and you're just there with your wife and go, oh, it's such a good album. Is there any particular bands or artists that you're excited about at the minute that you're listening to?
You know what? Usually it's not anything modern, to be honest with you. When we're at home, it's
Yeah.
It's Al Green, or it's
Oh,
some
dude, yeah, yeah,
Aretha, Aretha Franklin, or it's our my
yeah,
record
yeah,
collection, which is literally a record collection. Is
yeah.
we're actually putting vinyl on and listening at the house. So yeah, it tends to be older music, but
Mm,
that's just for lounging about, listening pleasures in the house. Not that I'll consume some modern music. Um, I just don't get a ton of it because I'm
no.
working on it. I work on so much of it every day that I have to keep a little bit
Yeah.
fresh on it for sure. But I don't consume it as a rabid fan as I used to.
Any maybe another quick story to chip in? Do you reckon any other MJ stories you can think of right now? Or
uh, he was an interesting fellow because he had a, like, kind of an innocence to him at the same time, where I think, like, he
mm,
never really was developed as a kid to interact with other people as much, or people on his own age.
yeah, yeah,
So he
yeah.
kind of would ask you like oddball. I remember, like, when he first met me, he asked me like, "Are you from Calabasas?" And I had no idea what he meant. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, like, it was like out of the blue. Like, and he's like, "You sound like you're from Calabasas," which really, there is no, like, "You sound like you're from Calabasas." I mean, nobody sounds like, I don't know what that means. Like, so,
Yeah.
but I remember we ordered some food, and there was an up where a studio, where like the kitchen was upstairs and the studio was downstairs.
Mm,
So I set out, I had the food and set out all the food all around the table, and I got all the guys, and so we're all sitting down, the engineers and me and the producers, and we're out
yeah.
eating. I look around, I'm like, "Where's Michael?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know." So I go back downstairs. I'm like, "Michael, the food's here." He's like, "Oh, I didn't know that was for me too." I'm like, "Yeah, man. When I said the food's here, man, it was for all of us." So he comes up and he starts eating food with us, and he gets a phone call, and it's one of his handlers, one of his guys that
Yeah.
and he answers to the phone. He's like, "Oh no, everything's going great. I'm having lunch with the guys," and he was just so stoked that we asked him to have lunch with us.
Yeah.
I'm like, this poor guy. Like, is nobody
Oh,
asking him to
man.
eat lunch? Like,
No.
come on.
He just wants to hang. He just wants to hang, you know?
Yeah, he just
Oh,
wanted to be
man.
like, he was so just so happy to say, "Oh, I'm eating with the
Yeah,
guys." I'm like, oh
yeah.
God, it broke my heart a little bit. So
I
anyway, there's
bet.
there's a Michael story.
Is there any information about your mix bus that,
Yeah,
you can
I
talk about?
typically I typically don't use too much compression on my mix bus. I'm usually doing the compression before that. A lot of times I'll start off with just on the top of it with some sort of EQ, maybe the fab
Mm,
filter EQ, something like if I need to be able to put a decent filter on the low end, on the super, below 20 hertz or something like that.
yeah.
Um, Clear it out a little bit, or solve any maybe overall problems I have.
Mm,
And then after that, I usually just use a variety of limiters depending on the project and depending on what I'm doing. And they'll hit the limiters in a certain way. I don't use the limiters. I never increase. I never have the limiter hitting more than a dB or two down at most. So it's it's fairly soft limiting, but I'll use sometimes multiple limiters to create the loudness that my clients expect.
okay, so are you gain staging? Is that your approach
Yeah.
when you're going with the
Yeah,
limit? That's
exactly. Yeah. So, I definitely don't ever have one limiter doing all the work.
yeah. So you're not pushing hard. So for example, I know a lot of us love, like you said, the Fab Filter stuff. I know I love. I use the Fab Filter L2, and
Hmm.
that's really interesting how you mentioned that the fact that you do that.
As soon as I met Eminem, I knew how epic he was going to be.
Yeah.
He came into the studio with a backpack, a hoodie, and out of his backpack he had a Discman and the headphones coming out, and he was writing in a notebook. And when I looked over at his notebook, like he hadn't said a word yet. This
Mm,
is when he was coming. He was the first time he was coming over to meet Dre. Um, I looked over his notebook, and there was like maybe 5 or 6 songs written on one page, but they were all done artistically. One song was written in a spiral. Another one was written on the edges of the notebook. Another one was written in
mm.
kind of like diagonal, and so it looked like a piece of artwork
Wow.
as he was writing.
So
And
good.
I remember looking. I was like, okay, this is going to be good. And I knew the kid was talented as soon as I saw him. So yeah, I did know he was going to be big. You're coming in with Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. Yeah,
You kind of know.
your chances are fairly high that you're going to be fairly big.
Any tips on beats and dealing with the low end beats and the bass on your small speakers for young bedroom producers?
Creating space for the bass is important. Making sure that it's not competing with your kick drum. Sometimes people do that with sidechain compression. I rarely ever do that, to be honest with you, but I do
Mm,
usually. I usually do it more with EQ. Another thing I love using is the for actual bass itself, sub bass and just regular bass, any low end. I use the Surfer 2 EQ,
oh, so cool.
the Surfer. I don't know if you know it at all, but
No.
it it allows you to do, like, say you create a bell EQ. You 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 name where the bell EQ is, right? Like say you like kind of like find the root of the song,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
then you can hit surf, and then now the bell is going to follow the tone of the bass. So wherever the whatever it is, it's on a G, it'll move up to a G. If it goes back down to a C, it'll move down to a C. So the top of
What?
the bell always stays to wherever the note of the bass is. So you're kind of getting this even uh, lift of level, when you're EQing down there. So I love using that Surfer EQ. It's one of my fun tricks. I used to do something like if like I was tuning an 808, I'd use like R bass or something like that, and then I would actually automate the frequencies. So whenever the 808 or the whatever the sub bass went to
Mm.
the next note, the frequency would automate, and I have a chart that tells me the note to frequency conversion.
That's so cool. And I know the 808 for a lot of our friends making hip hop, it's like it's just go to, isn't it, for most artists with the hip hop
Yeah,
in the hip hop
yeah,
world? Would you say?
hard to escape it. That's for sure in the hip hop world. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's ever present. A lot of people, and also answer Mandy's question. A lot of people do use a lot of distortion and or other
Mm.
things on the low on to make it translate a little bit better on smaller speakers. Which sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Depends on the project. So
So cool, man. Thanks for that. It's so great, Steve. Okay, so thanks again for that, Mandy. Awesome, awesome question. Daniel Crooks, what wireless headphones are you using, and what wireless headphones do you recommend?
I don't ever use headphones when mixing.
Okay.
Uh, I feel that this part of my ear is very vital, and I use speakers. So these speakers
Hmm.
I know. It's not that I won't sometime maybe go back and listen to my my pros or whatever my earbuds. But I always feel that headphones give you a very false narrative of what's going on.
Mm.
Um, because you're not using your ear the way it's manufactured to be used. So if you go back to the manual of your ear, you'll see that the God said this part of your ear is to be used to collect things to hear.
Yeah.
And if you cover it up and or bypass it by just putting earbuds in, you're kind of eliminating a big part of your hearing. So yeah, I don't tend to use headphones as much in the critical listening process of mixing. or mastering.
Um, okay, so what about overhead headphones? Do you ever kind of use like any open back headphones from time to time when you're listening to like maybe any little glitches on a track or anything like that? Or
Nah,
not
I
really?
rely on my just rely on my speakers.
So you
You know,
know your
I'm very old school on that one. Yeah,
oh, so good.
I mean, and I think not that people are doing headphones. There people do amazing mixes in headphones. I just have never
Mm.
grasped it to a certain extent, and I never had to because I never was mixing stuff in my bedroom or doing stuff maybe in places that I needed to be on headphones.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's so cool that you say that because I think maybe for kids, if you agree these days as well, that their listening environment is so important as you said, with the right speakers and the right acoustics and the right room. But a lot of people, as you know, they don't look into acoustics and that side of things. And acoustics, as we all know, for an 18-year-old kid, it's a hell of a lot of money, man. It's just like it's crazy, crazy money.
yeah,
So would you say maybe for a kid on their laptop with a pair of $200 headphones, would you say go for what you've got and try and use that and maybe get some uh maybe try different rooms in your house maybe just to kind of give it a go or you know
yeah. I mean, I'm always big on using what you got and figuring that out. I think you know I think as you learn over time, you become more discerning and you become more of a person that knows what you want. And so it's kind
yeah
of hard to say like an overall generalization on what you should and should do. Um, you know, personally, I just came up through a world that used speakers, and as I said, I kind of like the idea of using my whole ear to listen and not covering it up with things.
any routing tips for the low program material? Does Steve run multiple mix buses or anything like that?
Sometimes I'll do a drum bus, and then I usually do an overall mix bus, overall music bus.
Mm,
Then I'll do separate buses for like lead vocals, background vocals, and things like that. And then that all gets summed into obviously the stereo bus. Then in the system that I have, I'll often run simultaneously things out of channels 1 and 2 and channels 5 and 6 because channels 5 and 6 goes through my mastering rig. So now I can send everything out. So I'll have two stereo buses, and everything that's going to my main stereo bus, I'll duplicate to 5 and 6 and duplicate what I have on my main stereo bus that I'm listening
yeah.
to that 5 and 6 stereo bus so that when it goes through my mastering chain, it's just a duplicate of that. But yeah, I enjoy having, some subgroup controls, especially for ease of like trimming and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah. So how do you manage your schedule when you're completely stacked up with projects and other things come along when you're really excited about as well? How do you avoid overcommitting and staying sane? Are you good at estimating how long things will take you? This has been a real battle for me. Thanks, Brian. That's a fantastic question.
Yeah, that's always a hard one. I've had to learn over time that if you give people realistic times, they will accept it. And uh, also, if you're willing to work with them and willing to work with their time frame and say, look, I got this one project, but I can't wait to work on it. How about we start in 2 weeks from now?
Yeah.
They people generally tend to wait for me or tend to wait for that. And so yeah, I think uh, it does get a little hectic when things start stacking up, and of course, everybody wants everything done now a lot of times, and so that puts more pressure on you. But
Mm,
I've been a little bit better at either saying no or
yeah.
saying like I'd be happy to do it, but let's look at these dates instead.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm pretty good at estimating, especially with mixing. I tell people for typically it's a day and a half a song.
Mm,
So when I mix, I usually like to work on the song for 1 day and then come back the next
yeah.
day and fix whatever I missed, which takes me another half day. So then I'll work. You know, it the half days usually overlap. So you know, 7 songs will take me little less than 14 days to do. But
How was the Pink sessions?
She was fantastic. She's an incredible singer with incredible pitch, and then a just amazingly powerful voice for such a small human.
Mm,
Uh, and yeah, she's a lovely person. I don't really, like it's so long ago to be honest with you.
mm,
But yeah, she was when I was working with her, she was quite the young artist at the time,
yeah,
and yet still very secure in what she wanted and knew where she wanted to go and what she wanted to be uh, artistically. So a very impressive
yeah.
human, a very impressive person. Where you're like, oh, I I still don't know where I want to be and where I want to go.
Her range is
More
what Pink
exactly more than twice her age now. So
Pink's range, her vocal range is insane. It's like
oh yeah.
but before we move on to our last topic, with Destiny's Child as well, when you're getting people like Kelly and Beyonce, just hearing their vocal range, could they just hit the high notes? And did you just kind of sit back in your chair and go, "Whoa, that's insane! I can't believe that these people actually walk the earth"? Or did you just think, "Oh, okay, let's just add a touch more EQ on there, or let's like put the fader up a little bit," or did you
Uh,
sometimes go, "Whoa, that's just wow, that's
yeah,
just crazy"?
th- it was, and that point in time in the Destiny's Child's career, uh, it was it was a little more, the music wasn't, allowing them to express that much, to be honest with you. It was fairly
Mm,
limiting. And so it was fairly typical R&B stuff that I was kind of used to hearing when I was working on Brandy's projects or, whoever else's.
yeah,
Um, um, and it mainly was like, how quick can we get it done? And that was more of the thing, quick,
yeah.
and so more than, being kind of amazed about their artistry. Where when I was working with someone like Prince, I would say, yeah, oh, I was like, whoa. Tupac was amazing because he was so prolific. He was just constantly writing. Like we our live area of the studio was filled with 2-inch tapes of his,
Mm,
literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. It would just be hundreds of tapes,
crazy,
and
man.
each tape would have maybe three songs on it,
Mm,
each 2-inch reel. Um, and he was so quick. Once again,
no
and
way, man.
it was always amazing to me because he'd be in the studio drinking or smoking some weed, and kind of like
Actually,
when you're talking to your friends, how you kind of get into that like drunk slurry kind of talk. And I
yeah.
remember thinking, there's no way in the world this guy's gonna be able to nail a 16 bar verse, and then you get behind the mic, and all of a sudden he'd be like sober as as a preacher, and and the next thing you know, like, he'd be done. Like he'd be
It's
standing behind
crazy.
me asking me what's up with that mix. Like I could hear the headphones hit the stand before, like I didn't even know what was going on.
Mm,
So he was amazingly prolific, and just his lyrics were like nobody else's, and his flow was so infectious. So I really enjoyed working with him.